Welcome viewers, Dr. J.W. Morrison, theologist, Central Coast, New South Wales, Australia. This is another instalment in our Frankensteiniemism alphabet dissemination series.
Gender dysphoria is a condition where a person's physical, biological sex is one, say a boy, but in the person's mind they think they're really a girl, or vice versa. It's not something that you can identify on any objective test. You can't do a blood test, for example. You can't do MRI imaging. You can't do genetic testing to actually find this gender identity. My name is Dr. Michael Laidlaw. I'm an endocrinologist in Rockland, California. This gender identity, which is really a child saying, I believe I'm this, I believe I'm a boy, I believe I'm a girl, something opposite of their body. Once they say that, they go down this road of gender affirmative therapy. That consists of social transition, wearing, say, stereotypical clothes of the opposite sex to pretend that they're the opposite sex, then these puberty blockers, then these cross-sex hormones, and then finally surgical modifications to the body to try to make the person appear that they're the opposite sex.
So it's micro-incrementally progressive. Where the original influence may come from, possibly in some cases, it may not be legit. It could be some fanciful fantasy that's come up in the person's mind. But the way in which they're navigating all this now, the way in which they're approaching it and navigating it, it's so micro-incrementally, magnificently progressive that once one of these children, or particularly the children, that's who they're going after now, start this process, it's a cave where all the footsteps lead in and none lead out.
Puberty blockers are powerful hormones. They act on a small gland in the brain called the pituitary, and this controls the sex organs. For example, testicles make testosterone, ovaries make estrogen, and the pituitary controls that happening. Now, these blockers stop this action, and then whereas, say, a girl is in age 9 and continuing or beginning to develop in puberty and should continue on until a full adult woman, it's stopped. Once you stop it, there are various harms and problems that occur afterwards. Unfortunately.
Okay, so puberty blockers cause harms and problems.
Fortunately, many of our professional organizations are advocating for this, including Endocrine Society. And it's important to bear in mind that there's very small groups of people controlling these societies. Small groups of people are making these pronouncements, and then when physicians want to turn to what's the best practice, they're finding these things. And there's no rigorous research done. There's no controlled studies. It's very poor research, but it's, I guess, politically correct to go down these roads by these organizations.
So there's very little research on the long-term effects of this, although there are short-term, very evident short-term negativities associated with all this Frankensteiniemism. And in saying that, it's pretty well predictable, isn't it, that in a lot of the cases it's not going to go well. Now, you could have somebody go through the full operation and all the rest of it, and it could all go well. But what happens if that person comes to their senses and realizes that, oh my goodness, I'm not what I thought I was. I am who I was born as, but they've already gone through this micro-incremental progressive Machiavellian deceptive way in which they're pushing people through this magnificently. It's magnificent evil. When they come out the other end, they may not have wished that they've done it. You can't change it then you're stuck.
Doctors will feel compelled to follow what their organization says without really looking into the evidence necessarily. There is heavy-duty propaganda basically going on, but these gender clinics have sprung up and have multiplied all across the country. The numbers are going up. Around the world, in the UK, Canada, here, other places, more and more kids are being diagnosed with this, and
the reason for this is it's big money. There's a social contagion component to this.
There's a social contagion component. People, kids going on to YouTube, Tumblr, things like that. So the cases are rising. It's a major problem that we have to address. In my practice as a physician, I always look at side effects of medications before I give anything to anyone. Say for diabetics, I always tell them, if you can work on your diet and exercise first, I'd rather have you do that than take these medications, because there's side effects and there's problems that are potential. But if you need it, then you need to take it. With this, I can see no need to take these medications. I see the risks as being very high, and I see children as a very vulnerable population, can't speak up for themselves, and their parents are often propagandized by this movement. I've met a lot of these parents. My heart goes out to them. I've seen their kids and pictures of their kids, and really, it's about helping kids.
Okay, so now we've got the truth about being transgender, my transition story from Socia Goral.
Hello, this is a weird video for me to make, but it's something that I've spoken about on this channel before, and that is the fact that I used to believe, or I used to be trans, and since then I have detransitioned. This video is not intended to be transphobic. I'm just talking about my own experience and issues with the LGBT community. I was very young when I started feeling issues with my body and my self-esteem. I was maybe 8 or 9 when I hit puberty, and it was around this time that sort of my anxiety started. Then I started feeling discomfort within myself. And when I got into high school, I fell in with sort of an LGBT friend group. In this friend group, everyone sort of aligned their identities so fully with their sexuality or their gender that I began to believe that this was like normal, that it was normal to have your sort of only personality trait being your gender or your sexuality. And this was how a lot of them like self-identified. I fully remember many of my friends saying, oh, my only personality trait is that I'm gay or whatever. And that was the way that I thought friendships and that I thought people were supposed to be, that we were in this sort of righteous bubble that sort of defied societal conventions. And when I sort of saw the idols that...
That's interesting, viewers, because there's an element of defiance in all of this.
My friends looked up to, people like Elliot Page or Hunter Schafer. I would see posts from trans people that say essentially, I struggled with my body a lot when I was younger, and then I finally realized that I was trans and I decided to fully transition, i.e. like double mastectomy or bottom surgery, and then I finally felt happy. And when you're young, you don't really tend to sort of assess the information that you take in. You sort of see, well, at least for me, when I saw that information, I thought to myself, okay, well, not instantly, but over time you come to think, okay, well, that is the solution to issues with your body and issues with your femininity. So I decided very, very early in my life, I think as soon as I was 12 or 13, that the second I turned 16 or 18 or I had raised enough money, I would essentially run away from home and get a double mastectomy and go on testosterone, because I was non-binary and I did not feel, or I believed I was non-binary and I did not feel comfortable in sort of being feminine. Now, my parents weren't even necessarily against trans people, but the whole sort of culture of LGBT teens is that you are in some ways misunderstood by your parents. That's sort of the way that you perceive yourself to be, or how you perceive your relationship with your parents to be. whether or not, they're supportive or anti-trans. I know now that my parents love me no matter what, but still I would find reasons to sort of resent them and to find sort of excuses to isolate myself further and further from them, probably because this is what my friends were also doing and what a lot of the people I admired went through too, like issues with their parents, which is really sad. Looking back on it, I mean, I'm very, very skeptical of a movement that directly or indirectly, this is a very charged sort of, it's charged vocabulary. I don't intend it to be sort of criminalizing them, but I'm very skeptical of a movement that sort of isolates children from their parents and makes them question their parenting and almost encourages them to step away and to sort of have a found family rather than cooperating with and trying to understand your already family. And it's true too that I had a terrible relationship with my parents and with the rest of my family when I identified as trans. It was very, very easy to fall into the mindset of no one understands me, I'm from a different generation, my issues are completely unique to me. But the truth is that when I spoke about it later on, sort of after, with a few of the women in my family, they too have struggled with feeling feminine in their younger years. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're trans. And this is one of the biggest issues that I have at the moment. I think it's sort of posited as a solution when really the solution is something else entirely, or rather a teaching of self-acceptance in a way. And no one ever explained to me that puberty would be a difficult time emotionally. I knew, of course, that hormones were high and my body would change, but that was about it. No one ever told me that it's a strange feeling going from sort of childhood to adulthood.
Yeah, puberty can play a big part in how we're recognizing what our attraction is when you're going through the things of frigidity, in terms of, if you like, a male or a female, in the normal sexual approach. If you're a girl approaching a male or a male approaching a female, if it keeps backfiring on you, that can play a part in these people going into transgender states, because in the transgender world you're pedestalized for being in it, so you're instantly accepted and it's easy to get access to affection and grandizement.
And the difficulty of that does not point necessarily to your gender identity, it just points to sort of your own discomfort and mental health. I publicly identified as trans or non-binary for 4 years until I was, I think, 15 or 16, and after which I sort of made an Instagram post that said, I'm not trans anymore. And then I think I deleted Instagram and I sort of isolated myself for a very long time, because whether or not it was real, I sort of perceived the whole wide world to be against me. So I had sort of built myself into this little victim mindset where I thought that, because of course people didn't fully understand the fact that I was non-binary. I mean, a lot of people did not, because we were 12 and 13 and this was a new thing. But I took that very, very personally, and I took that to mean that they were against me, when they probably weren't. And so...
No, they definitely weren't. They were trying to give this person good counsel.
I assumed that the people who had been my friends when I was trans would stop being my friends after I stopped being trans, which was true. My LGBT friend group pretty much instantly disowned me, and I them to some extent, because I was slowly coming to terms with the fact that I did not want to be friends with
those type of people. What it does, the reason why they'll abandon you is because you're not a part of the culture anymore. You're making a statement that this culture isn't real, and they're not going to like that.
People who I consider to be superficial, but that's another issue and not one that I'll talk about publicly. The next couple of years after I sort of publicly detransitioned were very, very hard. It was really difficult to sort of re-establish myself, knowing that I had made such a huge mistake, and that was probably amplified by my own feelings of depression and social anxiety. And it was just, I don't think I ever fully reintegrated back into like high school society after that, because I found it really embarrassing. It was a difficult thing to have gone through so young and to base your whole identity around. And it's such a big thing that when you realize that you're no longer that thing, the people around you just turn, essentially. They think that you've been like lying to get attention, which I don't believe I was at the time. I think I was just heavily misguided, and being so young, I was so impressionable. And I read recently that it takes 14 times of being told something for a child to believe it. And so I suppose it could have just been that I was told so many times, it's possible that you're trans, it's possible that you're trans, that eventually I started to believe it. And this is nothing against the LGBT community, but I think I know a lot of people with stories similar to mine, both personally and online, but no one really talks about them. No one really talks about the rising amount of young women who at some point considered themselves trans, either medically transitioned or didn't, and then came to regret it. The only real time I've heard this discussed publicly or online was through a Joe Rogan podcast with Abigail Shriya, who's also written a fantastic book. But she basically says that to some extent, and this is nothing against like the transgender community, but to some extent, being transgender now is to depressed teenage girls what, say, anorexia was in the 90s or drugs were in the 70s. It's sort of what girls who have home problems, who have issues with their body, who have issues with their family, it's what they turn to as a solution for their identity. Or not solution, but what they base their identity around. To me, this is so convincing because I can see it now, how incredibly high the levels of transgender people are rising, particularly amongst young teenage girls. I mean, it's unprecedented. It's a several 1,000% increase in the last 20, 30 years. And you have to consider that some of that must be cultural and some of that must be societal. I don't think it happens organically that, such a huge percentage of young girls just wake up one day and realize that they're trans. I don't think that that's organic. I think that is motivated in some way, whether they perceive it to be that way or not. But the trouble with this is, despite the fact that I date women, not exclusively, I don't identify as being part of the LGBT community, because to me, the LGBT community, or the one that I have experienced, clings so much to its beliefs and to its system and its agenda of sort of self-victimization and attacking anyone who disagrees with this experience. This is true of a lot of detransitioners, that I can't personally agree with it. I don't think it's right to sort of attack anyone who doesn't agree with your specific dogma. And this is in no way an attack. If anything, it's me speaking about my own experience in, not officially, but rather leaving the LGBT community. And it's a difficult thing to talk about. I know that a lot of people will probably resent me for putting out this video, despite the fact that I've tried to stay as true to my own emotions and experiences as possible. But I do it with no malice in my heart. If anything, I do it out of empathy for other young girls who are like me, who see this as the new solution to their issues with themselves and their femininity. Every day I am so grateful that my parents didn't have enough money for me to medically transition at 12 or 13, or that I didn't run away from home and decide to have a double mastectomy, or that it's difficult for young people in the UK to go through these treatments, that you have to wait so long. Because if I had not had to wait so long on the NHS, I would have regretted it so much. In the past couple of years, my femininity has brought me so much, and I never would have been able to experience that had I not detransitioned and taken the time to really consider my own identity.
So what they're doing now, as far as I understand, they've got this Machiavellian mindset that's magnificently made a progressive micro-incremental progressive transgender transition program that happens relatively quickly. And once you get through the physical part of this, there ain't no coming back. She just said, I'm so glad that I didn't go through to that part, to that extent. And this is where a lot of them are getting caught now, and they're coming to their senses, and it's too late. They've allowed themselves to be chopped up. The medical side of it runs away with the dollars, big dollars, and the patients are left with all the complications and unchangeable aspects of this for the rest of their lives.
And I know I'm not alone, because I personally have at least like 5 to 10 friends that have all done this to some greater or lesser extent. And I think the statistics mirror this too. It's something like a majority of people who transition are equally as depressed as they were before than they are after. And I think the percentage of
So see, the mental aspect of this isn't necessarily solved by going down this road. It may not be that this is the problem. What they're saying is that this idea of changing your gender is the solution to your mental health issues or other questions that you're asking yourself about that you haven't fully got the answers to. There's a lot of unseen, tremendously grey areas in this where it's carelessly being narrated in a way in which once somebody gets on this bandwagon, they can't get back off. And once they've gone through the physical entirety of this, it's too late. If you come to your senses then, it's too late.
Suicide goes up very, very highly 5 years and after medical transition for a large percentage of people, which is interesting to me because it was always posited as a life-saving surgery to have sort of top or bottom surgery. And I think it's such a huge decision to make without having been told the other side of it. I mean, things like testosterone, they tell you that it's not permanent, but it is. If you take a look at some of the public sort of detransitioners who have been on testosterone, who have become infertile because of it, because that is an inevitable side effect of testosterone, who experience joint pains their whole life, chronic pain, fevers, anything like that. It's something that I wouldn't wish on anyone, to look back and realize that they made a mistake. It's such a huge and irreversible mistake to make that if anything I say can help people consider whether it makes them truly happy, then my goal is achieved. All I really want is for people, young women especially, to, before they make any permanent decisions, take a long, long look inwards. Heal your mental health, first of all. That is the biggest thing, I think. Heal your mental health, and then consider if you still feel uncomfortable within your own sexuality or gender. Because for me, after I healed my mental health, I feel almost no inclination towards like masculinity or androgyny. And I think that's the case for a lot of people who sort of experience depression in their earlier years, but then change as they get older. It's a terrible mistake to make, and one I hope that is made a lot less often. Obviously, it's not a mistake for everyone. I'm not talking about everyone. I'm talking about the select few who are socially pushed or socially nudged into it. I'm so grateful every single day that I did not make any medical choices that would have affected me my whole life now. Because if I had had the choice when I was 12 or 13, I fully would have believed, yes, I want to be infertile my whole life just for this. And now having children is like my number one goal in life. It's my biggest goal. It's my dream now to have children. And it breaks my heart that could have been taken away from me if I had been encouraged just a little bit more by my parents or by, the system or the NHS or anything like that. But yeah, this video has no hate towards trans people. I just want everyone to consider my own perspective and my own experience as someone who has detransitioned, and having been on both sides of sort of deep within the LGBT community, and then having left it, having stopped being depressed, having come to a lot more happiness in my life. And yeah, again, I only send love and hope and peace out to all of you, and I hope that you find peace within yourself if you're watching this video. And yeah, love you. Bye.
And really, that's all this information is about. It's about trying to help people that might be isolated, that might be ignorant, that are being persuaded to give themselves time. Let your mind find its way. Because there is a Machiavellian, micro-incremental system now that will do everything it can to persuade you, inspire you, and influence you to go right through with the transgender transformation. I call it Frankensteiniemism, the alphabetical dissemination. I'm Dr. J.W. Morrison, theologist. Bye for now.